Okay, so thank you very much for coming to the seminar on gut dysbiosis, stress, and anxiety. Today we'll be having an overview of the importance of the gastrointestinal tract and also the microbiota that live within us on stress and anxiety. We will have an intervention with psychologists in which we look at strategies to overcome stress um, and then move on to dysbiosis and stress and restoration of gut health. So, as an introduction, gastrointestinal tract, which we call gut, starts from the oral cavity um, to the anus on the other side. In between, there are various organs. And in fact, it is also known to be a tube, which is an external tube inside us. Okay. And so it goes through the stomach, where various organs feed also some digestive enzymes. And then from the stomach goes to the coiled, the light pink small intestines, which will eventually feed to the large intestines, which we call also the colon, and then moves into the rectum and anus. So, as you may know, so the main function of the gut is to digest food and absorb nutrients. But there are various other functions that are related to intestinal function. And one of them is that it is an immune learning hub where immune cells, which helps us to defend ourselves from foreign bodies, and also provides tolerance to any antigens that come in with our food. It's a very important um, crosstalk between the gut and the immune function. So there is also another crosstalk that we're going to discuss today, in between the gut, the microbiota, and the brain. So we call this the gut-brain axis. Okay? And that's mainly because the intestines produce various neurotransmitters and hormones, and these are also provide the conditions for the essential beneficial microbiota, and we will see how they also provide health promoting metabolites which are related to this gut brain axis. So let's start on the role of intestinal function on gut brain axis. And this is summarized in this slide, in which there are various mechanisms and various triggers that regulate the gut brain axis. In terms of mechanisms, there are specific neurotransmitters that are extremely important. One of them is serotonin, and we know that serotonin is produced in the gut and has a direct effect on mood. But in addition to that, there is the immune system and also chronic inflammation that we also discussed in the last health talk. And we know that chronic inflammation produces a number of molecules that affect depression and anxiety. And this is related to infections that come from the gut due to various conditions, such as one of the triggers, which is the leaky gut. And these infections, due to the production of these chemicals, also cause anxiety, depression, and also cognitive dysfunction. So that's a second mechanism through immune system regulation and also through chronic inflammation. When it comes to bacterial molecules as well, so the microbial metabolites, we know of specific metabolites that regulate anxiety-like behavior. And we also know that specific probiotics are important to modulate and attenuate this particular behavior. such as lactobacilli and bifidobacterium. In fact, studies show that specific bacteria are able to decline both anxiety and depression scores. And this is mainly due to the regulation of a specific molecule, which is produced also by the microbiota, which is GABA. And GABA is important to stimulate the vagus nerve, which is a direct connection between the gut and the brain. In terms of triggers, we mentioned various, and one of the most important for this health series is the microbiota. And we know that this balance in the microbiota results in specific depression stimulations. And that is known that there are specific bacteria which, when they are increased, like Bacteroidetes and Actinobacteria, and when we have decreased amounts of others, this is associated with depression state. So microbiota balance is extremely important, and it's a trigger of depression if it is not in balance. Then we have specific food particles. Here we will mention also a bit later on the tryptophan, which is an amino acid which comes from proteins. And tryptophan is extremely important in the production of various health promoting substances. One of them is actually serotonin. Okay? And here I'm showing a figure of a hot almond milk with pure dark chocolate, which is definitely a tryptophan shot. Well, that's most probably why, after having such a, a treat, one would feel better. Then we have leaky gut, which is a trigger. This is due to, if you remember, that the gut lining is one Celtic, and therefore the tightness of the gut lining is extremely important to maintain the right conditions and reduce inflammation of the intestinal tissues. And in fact, we call this the gut lining integrity. And if there is an issue in this tightness, then the gut lining becomes permeable to substances which shouldn't enter the tissues. But it can also be permeable, of course, to microbes that should stay in the hollow tube, which we call the lumen. We know that leaky gut is a very important aspect of chronic inflammation, and as we said before, chronic inflammation provides molecules that um, results in depression and also various negative impact on mood, anxiety, and cognition. So with that introduction, we are now moving to the guests, where we discussed together strategies to overcome stress and anxiety. And today we have Dr. Adele Muscat and Roberta Farrugia de Bono. Okay, so thank you very much for being with us during this health talk on mental health and intestinal function. With us today, we have Roberta Farrugia de Bono, a clinical psychologist and family therapist, and also Dr. Adele Muscat, sports psychologist and lecturer at the Institute of Physical Education and Sports. So thank you for coming. Um, Today, so this month in May is a mental health awareness month, and I would like to ask you to provide us a bit more information about mental health, the
Mammi told
signs
fam.
in that, and what we can do, and what is the potential causes.
Okay. Mela, if we had to look at stress, I think I can say that over the past years, especially after COVID, a lot of people have been, accessing mental health services because of stress-related symptoms that vary quite a bit. So in our practice, we've been meeting with people of all ages, coming from all walks of life, who are finding it more and more difficult to manage their stress levels. And so, yes, if we had to think about a priority for mental health, definitely taking care of our stress levels and taking care of our bodies to manage our stress levels should be a top priority, you know?
Very good. And
Um, from my side, my contact is mostly with young people and athletes in general.
Mhm.
And despite the thought that athletes are physically healthy and the exercise that they do on a regular basis helps their mental health, they still do come up with a lot of stress symptoms. Definitely, it's because of the need to perform and also the rushed lifestyle they are leading. But we're seeing more and more young people, more and more children with stress symptoms. So, as Roberta said, especially from the pandemic to now, it seems that the general population is struggling more and more with such issues. Of course, to me, it's also the built up environment, the lack of nature that we are facing as well. And these stress symptoms come about in different forms.
of course, it would be also nice to do a Zoom call in the garden. Yeah, we are all in the office. Okay, no, that's important that we recognize the potential causes of
Mhm.
these stress. Of course, pandemic played a major role also within sports and athletes because of course they reduced their performance because they couldn't most probably do their routine exercise as well, so that even increased the
Yes.
the issue of stress related to and anxiety, I would say, related to performance in that case as well, but also to public at large. um, so, um, so what are actually the causes? What happens in terms of um, like physiology? In terms of physiology, what in- triggers
Let's
stress?
let's say that I think it's very important to note that we all need a little bit of stress in our lives. So I don't think that we can, go without any stress because stress is part of our lives. In fact, there is good stress and bad stress. So, for example, if you had to, I don't know, see an athlete, for example, just right before a race or whatever, obviously the stress levels are going to be quite high. Even a student studying for an exam and facing the exam, right now it's May, so it's also exam time. The anxiety will be there, the stress levels will be there. Now, what happens is that stress is very much, in my experience, an individualized experience. So an event like an exam, a race, whatever, could have different meanings for different people, and therefore they would suffer different levels of stress when faced with the situation. And most often, the stress comes when there is a mismatch between their belief in their ability to take the task and how much that task is big for them. Okay, so when there's that mismatch, when I think that I don't have the coping skills to manage the task ahead of me, then my stress levels will increase. Okay, and that's when it becomes then bad stress, because if it's, especially if it is continued stress, then it will definitely have an impact on our mental health and on our well-being. So yes, sometimes you face a very difficult situation, but then it passes and you go back to your normal functioning. But some people, because they feel very much overwhelmed, would be passing through situations that are ongoingly difficult, okay, because their belief about their coping skills are very low, and therefore they'll be constantly facing stress, and that then would definitely have an impact on our brain, on our serotonin levels, and other chemicals in the brain, which would make then the body kind of feel the symptoms of stress. I think that is my explanation of why people, kind of feel stressed. And then obviously there are the symptoms. I don't know whether you want to go into them now, but obviously when a person is stressed, then there are different things that happen again differently for different people. You know, some people would have, for example, headaches. Some people would have sweats and a general feeling of unwellness. Some people would have problems with their intestines and their stomachs, as we know there is that link. So different people are affected differently with different situations and different types of stress.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned, for instance, serotonin, as you described, an important neurotransmitter, which is mainly
Mhm.
produced in the intestines, and therefore we will discuss that later in the health talk. Um, but also other hormones, I think, that are extremely important. For instance, the main relationship between stress and gut dysfunction is actual cortisol because it
Mhm.
promotes
Yes,
both.
it increases when you are stressed, exactly.
Exactly. So for instance, in case of cortisol, it's important to increase to wake up. Yeah, so it's extremely important to spike in the morning, but it's actually also very important to lower down in terms of quantities during the day. Okay, um, so these are important physiological aspects which connect um, stress levels with also intestinal function, of course.
And we can do a lot for ourselves on a daily basis, I feel, to regulate these levels. A few things that I discuss regularly with my students in particular, but also with athletes, are first of all, yes, the need of trying to find some time in nature. Research is finding that the blues, the greens, are very important for us. And again, some people will tell you what nature, but you can simply find a garden close to you, or you can, on your way home from work, maybe drive somewhere close to the sea and spend just 10 minutes looking at the sea.
Mhm.
So that is, I feel, a very, very important factor. And the importance of the sun in the winter months, because we do struggle mentally if we're not getting enough daylight and sun hours, what we call seasonal affective disorder as well in some cases. Animals, so yes, spending time talking to animals.
Having animals, having a pet.
Yes, I go and look for the cats at San Anton
That's not
Gardens, for
yes.
example. That's a very good mindfulness technique that I find, just spending those few minutes with the cats, chatting away to them. Hugs are also very important. If we get a few hugs here and there, that's going to help us regulate our hormones. Of course, exercise is very, very important.
Yes.
Doing exercise regularly will reduce anxiety levels. And as well, nutrition. We do know, we have seen the link over and over that access to the right nutrition is going to help our mental health in general as well. I don't
Mhm.
know if you have something else, Roberta, to add to my list.
Being Robert, I'm going to add sleep to the list. I think good enough hours of sleep per night. It always depends on the person, but having a good night's sleep is very important for our stress levels as well. And in terms of green, I could also mention like even having plants can make a difference. If your home is kind of, and sometimes you don't need to have a lot of green fingers, but having plants that can live in extreme conditions, like if you forget to water them or stuff like that, will actually add a bit of good feel to your day by just having, a plant to look at, and more than one, perhaps even better. So if, having green spaces are difficult, you can always add the green to your home. That also makes a difference. I think also having a friend to talk to. Adele mentioned hugs, but having one person at least in your life with whom you can share sometimes your worries and your difficulties is also extremely important. People who do not have at least one good friend do suffer, when it comes to, do suffer more when it comes to stress levels. So even having just one person in your life that, you can talk to is very important too.
And on this note, there are a lot of groups these days on social media, and you can combine several of the things that we've mentioned together: nature walks, making new friends, the
Yes.
sun. So do look up for social media groups that are promoting nature treks, even travel sometimes. Then
Mhm.
again, Roberta knows that my solution to all stresses is travel.
Cool. Same as mine. And now that we can fly again after COVID makes it a bit better. But not everyone can, afford that. So,
Yes.
trying to find, like Adele said, these groups where you can interact with people, but at the same time do some physical exercise, be in nature, etc., etc., really fulfills all those requirements for being better able to manage your stress levels, you know?
Okay, so excellent. I mean, it's really a very short intervention, but the value of such intervention to actually provide the strategies to reduce stress. For instance, I can go and buy a plant now and a pet, so that so these are really valuable, it's really valuable. And of course, I cannot but not mention, because you mentioned nutrition. Nutrition is important as a fuel,
Yes.
but the engine is also extremely important, which is actually the intestinal function. And this is what this health talk will provide information on, because the intestines is actually producing all these neurotransmitters and hormones that are extremely important in regulating stress as well. So I always add to the nutrition, which is extremely important, the gut health, which is the intestinal function, and together that will provide us reduced stress as well. So thank you very much for this intervention. I think it was extremely valuable, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So to sum up some of the information that was given in the videos, um, here are some data on neurotransmitters that are actually microbiota derived metabolites, so substances that these bacteria in the gut are able to synthesize from various sources. Um, and these include serotonin that was mentioned today. So the source is actually an amino acid called tryptophan. And this tryptophan, in the presence of specific gut microbes, can be converted into various health promoting substances, as you can see on that image. And one of those substances will be converted by the addition in microbes into serotonin, which is depicted as the purple 5-HT. Okay. Now, in the gut, serotonin is extremely important because it induces gastrointestinal motility, so movement of the digested food. Okay. And so low levels of serotonin would result in long retention time of the digested material, which is, of course, um, not beneficial. And in fact, we find tryptophan, although tryptophan is significant, not really significant different in symptoms in conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, for instance. But serotonin synthesis is, and this is because of the disbalance in the bacteria related to its production. In addition to serotonin, which is 5-HT, we also have other neurotransmitters produced in the gut that are related with depression and anxiety, and that is related to inflammation. But since inflammation is also related to depression and anxiety, all these neurotransmitters have direct or indirect effects. And these include dopamine and GABA. So what happens in terms of presence of disbalance in these gut microbiota, which we call dysbiosis, that would result in various conditions. We mentioned leaky gut before, but of course, it is also resulting in metabolic diseases and conditions such as weight gain, obesity, insulin resistance, inflammatory disorders and diseases, and as we mentioned today, also depression. So we mentioned leaky gut. What does that actually mean? It means that there is the tightness between those cells which you see here in a line, aligned next to each other, which are normally very tight together, they become sort of open, and therefore there is permeability between the lumen, which is on the top, and the tissues, which is under the lining. Okay, and that permeability would result in increased infection risk because there is potential permeability of harmful bacteria, but definitely inflammation and also chronic phase of that inflammation, which all this will relate to um, depression and anxiety. Now, there are various factors that can cause this imbalance, which we call dysbiosis. Today, of course, the most one is the central one, which is stress, but there are others. Could be diet. We mentioned as well that diet is also related to stress level, and that's the link between the gut and brain axis, and also medications, but also presence of microbes, and also age is related to an imbalance in the bacterial abundances and diversity. This can be measured, and it's important to look at the cause so that we can restore that specific dysbiosis. There is a dysbiosis index which runs from 1 to 5, with 3 in the middle being mildly dysbiotic. Anything less than 3 is non-dysbiotic, but we still have to take care of any imbalances in the abundances and diversity of the microbes in the gut. And anything above 3, so 4 and 5, these are severely dysbiotic. And then generally these are related and associated with inflammatory bowel disease, so a disease situation. Individuals with a mild dysbiosis are associated mainly with irritable bowel syndrome. Okay? Now, in addition to providing a value, it's also important to provide functional profiles. Okay, which bacteria, and more importantly, what are the functions of these bacteria? Okay, so it could be butyrate producing bacteria, which are low. In that case, one would need to restore that balance. It could be bacteria that take care of the mucus layers. It could be specific bacteria, and we mentioned these in previous health talks, like F. prosnitzi and Akkermansia, for instance. These are gut health markers and should be in the right amount. And also pro-inflammatory bacteria, which are pathogenic, should be, of course, in this case, at low levels. Otherwise, there is a inflammatory response. So yes, in terms of this dysbiosis, it can be restored. We also previously discussed that in addition to having an imbalance in bacteria, it is very important to restore it. We would need also a correct lipid profile. Also the right vitamins, because in general, the vitamins are also synthesized by specific bacteria, and therefore we need to take care of any deficiencies. And through dietary and supplementary interventions, one can actually restore dysbiosis. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Now, for all the Maltese participants, we are offering this month a cortisol test to look at cortisol levels. Of course, this is provided free of charge. And if you're interested, you can always reach me on the mobile number that you can see on your left. You can also send an email, which is restore@investinyour.health. And then if you want more information, you can always find additional information on the Facebook page. It's called Restore Gut Function and Prevent Disease, with a full stop in between each word. We also have created a Facebook group called Gut Microbiota and Disease. And you can also follow my own Instagram, where I post post information about gut health. So to end this session, the importance of cortisol, okay, and this actually impairs mental state and also impairs gut function. And now today you appreciate that gut function is related to mental state, and this will become a vicious circle if we don't take care of our gut function. So thank you very much. I always invite you to invite other friends to these seminars and share our links with your friends. We are present in various things. We are present in Facebook, Instagram, and all these talks are now also available on YouTube channel. Good. Let me stop the recording.